Hello good people, I'm Dmitry, and back at the hotel and behind me we've got something real special today from Steelseries. They're launching their new Apex line of keyboards, the Apex Pro and the Apex 7, but I want to talk today about the new Omnipoint switches because they're mechanical, they have interesting characteristics, and normally I would not dedicate a single video just to talk about the switches because there's so many out there, but this one is different. And huge thanks to Fantex and Steelseries for sponsoring our Computex trip. So what are Omnipoint switches? So they are mechanical, and the main idea behind them is for the user to adjust the actuation distance. So normally with MX Cherry switches, you have an actuation point at around 2 millimeters, somewhere in the middle of the whole travel distance, and that is when the switch is actually registered. There's a physical contact within the switch itself that sends a signal and tells your source then when the key is actually pressed. With Omnipoint switches, the actual mechanism is slightly different, but the actuation distance customization is very cool because instead of you wanting to actuate the key midway, you can actuate it at a really high point, which means you don't have to press as much, you don't have to bottom out, and that whole range goes from 0.4 millimeters, which is insane. That is currently, I would say, the fastest actuation switch you can get, and it goes all the way to 3.6. So basically giving you the full range of motion between when the switch is from the top to the bottom before it actually is registered. And that is really cool. Now, what are the usage case scenarios of something like the adjustability of your actuation point? Now, with using the shortest actuation point at 0.4 millimeters, everyone's joking around that you might as well just blow on the switches and they will be activated and registered, or going all the way to 3.6 millimeter travel distance for the actuation point to give you a typewriter feel. So going old school if you like to really bottom out. And the cool thing about the Apex Pro is the ability to customize per key actuation point customization. So your WASD zone can be a certain actuation point while the rest of the keys can be something else. And that whole range of actuation distance is incredibly precise from 0.4 to 3.6 millimeters. And they're able to do that with magnets. So there's one magnet in the actual stem that goes down, and there's a magnet on the PCB, and they're measuring the magnetic flux is what they tell us. And somehow that goes into the firmware or the keyboard, and that registered the amount of actuation point and where it should actually register the switch. We're told a lot of calibration went into designing something like this, and initially they went from 0.5 to 3.5 range, but they figured out how to calibrate the magnets and calculating the magnetic flux that those magnets generate to give us even a lower actuation point and a slightly higher one too. Some more technical information. So they are a 45-gram switch, which is incredibly light, and they were actually co-developed with Gateron, and they tried to replicate the Gateron red switches, which I absolutely love. They're my favorite switch now, and Steelseries was like, this is even better. And I would say they feel slightly different. The Gateron reds have a slightly heavier that initial movement down, while the Omnipoint switches are incredibly linear, and that makes them really good for what they're trying to achieve within that actuation range. Some people have asked why they didn't go the route of having a tactile point built into the switch, but that would make no sense for a switch onto which you can customize the actuation distance. And because there are no metal contacts to register the actuation like you would see on MX Cherry, the switch is basically bare bones, which means the durability is insane. So they've tested 100 million clicks plus, and that takes months to constantly press with the machine, and they said that this is minimum 100 million clicks, and it just kept going still. So durability in the long term for the Omnipoint switches. And the last thing I want to cover is the usability of the Omnipoint switches for regular users. I feel like it's almost similar to setting lighting on your system. You set it once and you forget it unless you want to revisit that and change it up a little bit for some more customization. I feel like the Omnipoint actuation distance will be exactly the same way. If you prefer a light switch, if you've been using, let's say, the MX Cherry speed switches that actuate at 1.2 millimeters and they're really fast as well, if you've been using something like that, setting 1.2 here would be perfectly fine. But if you want something that actuates a bit further down below 3 millimeters, that is a totally different experience too, because if you like to bottom out while typing, that is available. and it kind of gives you that broad range between gaming, between typing, or something in the middle. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the type test. And the last thing, the actuation distance can be set through the keyboard or through the software, and I would personally set the WASD area to be around 3.5 because I like to bottom out when I'm walking my character, while having the rest around 1.5 to 2 millimeters. And the 0.4 millimeter actuation distance is actually quite insane, but I feel like just resting my finger on the keys, because they're so linear and so light, I tend to just activate it accidentally, and setting a slightly deeper actuation point would of course remove that accidental press. Alright guys, so that is SteelSeries Omnipoint switches explained. Let me know if you think they're gimmicky or actually functional for your usage case scenario. In my previous experience with the Wooding 1 keyboard that had analog switches onto, you can also adjust the actuation point from I think 1.5 to 3.6. That was pretty cool, but I said it once and I forget it. But here you can go the actuation point really close to the surface for them to be incredibly light. So you can tap on the keyboard, and if you train, it won't be an issue. So guys, I'm Dmitry. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to check out this other relevant content. I'll talk to you in the next video.